Talks, where my guest today is Malcolm Foley. Malcolm, who holds the BA from Washington University in St. Louis in Religious Studies and Finance with a minor in Classics. We'll have to talk about that. That's quite a combination. And the MDiv from Yale Divinity School is a man who wears many hats, at least 4 10-gallon ones that I can tell. So first of all, Malcolm is a PhD student in Baylor's Department of Religion who is nearing completion of a fascinating dissertation to which we will eventually turn. Malcolm is the special advisor to Baylor's President Linda A. Livingstone for equity and campus engagement. He is the director of the recently launched Black Church Studies program at Baylor's Truett Seminary, and along with his wife Desiree, is the director of discipleship at Mosaic Church in Waco. And on top of this, Desiree and Malcolm are recently new parents to Jasmine. So Malcolm, how it was that you were able to carve out this time to spend with me, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm really glad you were able to. So welcome, friend. Really pleased you're here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So why don't we just jump on in, because people don't want to hear me introduce you. They want to hear from you. Malcolm, I wonder if, like the sound of music suggests, why don't we begin at the beginning? Talk to us a bit about your family growing up and your own sense and stirring to ministry and what that looked like in its embryonic forms.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm thankful. So my own kind of conversion story is more of a Presbyterian one than an evangelical one, in the sense that I grew up in the faith, had two very faithful, godly parents. I mean, a father who has been kind of a model of just godly manhood for me. I mean, a mother who I love and take. I mean, I take a lot. I take 95% of my mannerisms from my dad. And then just kind of personality wise, I think I take a lot from my mom. But I mean, I'm deeply thankful for both of them for raising me in the faith. Where, I mean, I can't remember a time ever not deeply believing that Christ had died for my sin, and that he's the eternal Son of God. And so I'm deeply thankful. I'm deeply thankful for that. It wasn't until so when I was a teenager, at the Black non-denominational church that we were serving at that time, there was a woman in that congregation who would always call me Bishop, and I resisted it. I was just teaching Sunday school at the time. But she saw something in me. And in high school, I was actually a math, science, and computer science student in magnet programs from middle school through high school. But it was in high school that I took a comparative religion class, and that's what catalyzed me kind of digging deeply into the history and theology of our faith. And so those seeds were set very early, and they germinated and flowered in ways that I didn't really expect in the years that would follow.
Isn't it wonderful when folks within fellowships see gifts and graces in the lives of young people and they name them? You may know the story that George Truett had come with his family from North Carolina to Texas, and in White Right Baptist Church, the church called George to ministry and more than less said, "You're going to be licensed and ordained." So that's a wonderful story of the care and commitment that you enjoyed and experienced as a child of the church. I've sometimes referred to myself as a church rat, and it seems as if though you were a church mouse yourself. Malcolm, so this is a fascinating confluence of interest. Here you are now at WashU studying not only religious studies, but also finance, not only finance, but classics. You go off to Yale, you fall in love with the early and the medieval church. Yeah. And how are all these things working together, and how do they begin to crystallize?
Yeah. So in undergrad anyway, the religious studies actually, so finance came from, hey, I've done all this work in math, I should probably apply that in some way. Also, I mean, if I'm thinking about jobs, which I obviously should be thinking about, finance seems like a good way to go. But actually, as that went on in my junior year of undergrad, when I was looking at internships, particularly in investment banking, I went through that process and ended up getting to the point where I was like, I don't actually want to spend a significant period of my life just kind of making money on money. So I started looking at seminaries at that point. Religious studies was a thing that I was that was something that, as I said, I was interested in since high school, but the classics was entirely Greek, and so that was just learning the Greek language specifically to be able to read the New Testament, and so that's essentially what undergirded that commitment. But yeah, so then when I got to seminary, that's when I discovered, specifically the Christology of the early church, moving into the medieval period and actually into the Reformation too. For me, Christ has always been the center. Just the center of my piety. But in digging into, especially the debate surrounding Christology, whether we're looking at the ecumenical councils or beyond, those are things that really those are things that really excited me, and continue to excite me. But the dissertation actually ended up going in an almost completely different direction. So
let's segue.
Yeah.
You're captivated now by church history in general, Christology and its formation within the church through the early stages up into medieval and even into Reformation. So you apply, you're accepted into the PhD program in religion in general, church history at Baylor. And it's been said that a scholar finds a dissertation or a thesis topic, and that topic also finds the scholar. So the question is, your dissertation, for those who don't know, focuses upon African-American Protestants' response to lynching from the late 19th to the early 20th centuries. So first of all, how did you get there? and then secondly, how's that coming?
Yeah.
Because I understand that the end may be in sight, and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train.
Right. Yeah. So interestingly, even when I came to Baylor, I had only applied to theology programs, and specifically to do early church theology, and it was actually because of Dr. David Whitford in the religion department who saw my application and essentially thought, hey, if theology doesn't have a match for this guy, I want him in the history of Christianity. And so that's what I was initially poised to do. I was initially poised to do Calvin and his links with the early church. Started getting into Calvin scholarship, thought, hey, there's a lot out there. I don't know how much of a contribution I'm going to be able to make here. Started to shift towards looking at some Puritans, actually. So there was one guy I was ready. His name's Edward Polhill. He has this great work on union with Christ, and I just thought, hey, I'll just do a comprehensive look at his work. And then I took a class on American Christianity after the Civil War, and we started to talk about the fundamentalist modernist controversy in the early 20th century. And one of the questions that constantly kind of burned in the back of my mind was, Black men, women, and teenagers are being burned alive across the South. What's the church saying about that? And I kept looking. I kept looking for articles and books, and found little. Not only did I find little, but what I did find was in many ways deeply unsatisfying. What I found was in some ways the assumption that Black Protestants had been kind of cowed into silence by lynching. I found some arguing that the response in these situations was largely a politically conservative one, in the sense of, well, hey, if we just pray, it'll stop. Let's just kind of, if we do better, if we do better morally, then lynching will stop. And one of the things that initially struck me when I read those was, I don't think that's how human beings work. I think in the face of a culture, I think in the face of a culture that is constantly poised toward your death, you will find whatever means necessary to resist that, to affirm your own dignity. And so then that's then what drove, those questions. Essentially, I got to the point where I thought, this has to be my dissertation topic. This is what I have to write on. And so my hope, and I'm putting myself on blast now in this public forum, to say that I hope to be done, to be able to graduate in August. But that's the goal, and that's what I'm working towards. But it's been quite the journey.
So it really is a journey of you finding it and it finding you. And this is something that not only your previous preparation had prepared you for, but it became for you more than sheer academic. It became also existential. So existential questions are driving this study too. So Malcolm, unless someone has joined Rip Van Winkle in a time capsule, or perhaps has gone back underground with Puxatawny Phil, they should know that we are now in the midst of Black History Month. And speaking to a Black Christian minister, academic today, the question that comes to me is this, and I'd love for you to reflect upon this. Why is our yearly observance, monthly observance, not only important to the African American community, but important to others also, Malcolm? Would you reflect on that with us?
Yeah, I think this is true for Black communities, but every community as we observe Black History Month. The history of particularly Black people in this country is not just one of suffering. It can often be. There has been a fair amount of suffering, but in the midst of that, there are robust traditions of resistance. There are robust traditions of the affirmation of human dignity that have it's been necessitated by the fact that there has been this profound suffering. But I also think it's hugely important. So it's important for us as Americans, particularly, to understand that Black American history is American history. But even more specifically, I think it's important for the church to understand that the history of the historically Black church is family history as well. That there has been because of our particular history, there are particular theological questions, particular threads of biblical interpretation, all these things that actually make the Christian tradition richer. Whenever we're faced with especially kind of radically different experiences in the world that require us to ask different questions of the scriptures, that is all. I think that's always that can always be a fruitful move, and it's one that I think ultimately leads toward the edification of the body of Christ broadly. So I think history in general, and this is one of the things that I've found to be true as I've kind of become a historian. There was a time when I thought, hey, I just want to be a historically informed theologian. That's actually flipped over the course of the last 5 years, where kind of my hope is to be a deeply theologically grounded historian. But it's important for us to understand where we've been, for us to properly understand where we are and where we want to go. And so I think, particularly for us, I think it's important that we understand that Black history is actually a very important piece of that.
And Malcolm, recently a couple of volumes have come out that I think really make the point that you are emphasizing. Our friend Esau Macaulay's Reading While Black, and then the important volume more recently of Lisa Bowers, African American Readings of Paul.
Yeah.
So this is not something that is hermetically sealed. This is valuable across racial lines for the church and its enrichment. So I appreciate very much that response. So Malcolm, if it's okay, can we turn personal for a minute? So many of us enjoy following you on social media, and those who do know of the birth of Jasmine to you and to your wife Desiree. So here's a question: in what ways, in the midst of a really full life, have you found Jasmine to be changing your life for the good?
My family life is fundamentally a source of joy and a respite for me in the midst of, like I said, the 4 jobs. In waking Jasmine up every morning, that's how my day starts. And it's a wonderful way. It's a wonderful way to start the day. We named her Jasmine Ida Foley. Her middle name is after Ida B. Wells, specifically because of my research, but also because Ida B. Wells is just a hero of mine. But it's a constant joy. To see her grow, to see her develop. And also just to make her giggle. Like it's a deep joy. And especially as someone who, my research is essentially centered on death. Granted, it's resistance to death, but still death. To have, just to kind of have this beautiful piece of new life that can be a source of joy for me in the midst of that. It's a good thing. So I'm deeply thankful to the Lord. Thankful to Desiree to have a wonderful wife in this journey. I'm thankful.
Sounds like a proud daddy to me. So Malcolm, it's our privilege to work together within Baylor's seminary known as Truett in general, but your particular focus in these days is serving as the director of the Truett Black Church Studies program. To be sure, this is a newly launched program in its initial stages. that doesn't mean that you don't have a bold vision for this program. And I'm sure that some people are listening in so that they can hear you visit with me about what might this look like. So ideally, as you think about this program and its stages of growth and development, where would you like to see the Baylor University Truett Seminary Black Church Studies program go?
Yeah. So ideally, you know, I'd like it to start kind of as a program in which people can get a certificate or concentration in one of in one of the seminary's degrees, where this is an opportunity for them to kind of get a taste of what the Black church tradition looks like, and that's looking at theology, biblical interpretation, music. I mean, there's history. I mean, there's sociology, and like all these things. I think to get a really robust understanding of this tradition, you've got to hit it from a number of different angles. But paired with that, I don't want it to stop there. I mean, I'd like sometime in the future for us to be able to offer a research PhD where this is something that where this can be a hub, where this can be a hub for folks. I've joked that I'd like to build a kind of a Justice League of Black Orthodox men and women who are doing just really good scholarship in this field. I think there's a need for that in higher education broadly, but even I think perhaps even more importantly for the church, for local churches. I think we need to constantly be reminded of the fact that we're not doing this as just an ivory tower exercise. The work of theology, the work of looking through church history, the work of biblical interpretation, the work of pastoral care, all of this is done for the edification of the body of Christ. And that remains kind of first and foremost in my mind. And I'd like that to undergird kind of the work of this program, hopefully future institute, as well. That this is for the global church. The more I can avoid this being seen as just a provincial effort, the better, because this isn't something that I want to be kind of limited to the seminary, or even really limited to just this university. It's for the benefit of people beyond that as well. So that's the vision. Especially once the dissertation is done, I hope to focus all my attention on the enacting of that vision. But that is the vision.
You know, Malcolm, you and I have had the opportunity to interact with any number of alumni from Bishop College.
Yep.
And so you and I have seen that in many ways, although this is a fresh iteration and instantiation of this vision, Baylor University has had partnership and connection with historic Black schools and causes for a very long time indeed.
Yep.
And so to be able to renew old relationships, although now obviously, unfortunately, Bishop College, it no longer exists, but there is a legacy that we can lean into. And even this semester, as you know, our friend, the Reverend Dr. Major Jemison, himself a Bishop alum, has been on campus, will continue to be on campus. So as archival material is retrieved, it can also be preserved within our Texas collection. So this is just the tip of a huge iceberg. And one is really excited about seeing all the features and facets going forward.
Yeah. And I think there's also an opportunity. I mean, it can often be the case that the relationship between even institutions like this, or even the ways in which things like Black church studies are interpreted, it can be easy for those things to, I think, descend into a paternalistic relationship.
Yeah.
Where this is a and one of the things that I want to emphasize even in the work of this program is that, as I said before, this is family history. This is not this other thing that is really kind of, it's really separate from our real mission as an institution. There's just this other thing that we're also doing. No, this is actually like this history, this theological interpretation, all of these things are actually, they're actually central to who we are, that we actually all have things to learn from these traditions. And the more that we kind of expose, especially those seeking to become ministers, but those who seek to serve the church in any number of capacities. It's important for people to be able to interact with different cultural expressions of the faith, and also different kind of histories in which the ways in which Christianity has been enculturated. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, Malcolm, I so appreciate those tones and terms. I mean, it's the idea of family, it's the idea of solidarity, it's the idea of unity. I remember as a Baylor undergrad myself, so enjoying English literature classes that I was privileged to take with Dr. Andy Moore. And in the reading particularly of John Donne, that famous meditation where Donne says, we're all part of the continent, a part of the main. If one is diminished, we're all diminished. So ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So at the end of the day, there is a common humanity that we enjoy and that we share and that we need to lean into. And plus, it is this beatific vision of revelation, every tribe, tongue, people, nation. It's the Pauline baptismal formula. In Christ, there's neither Jew, Greek, slave, free, male, female. So this is who we are. This is an ancillary. This is pivotal. And I'm just so grateful that you're going to be able to lead us in these winsome and important ways. So I need to give you the last word because you have things to do. So Malcolm, it's always a joy every time I have a chance to visit with you, whether it's our one-on-one Zoom meetings, monthly or bi-weekly. But I wonder if there's something just kind of on the frontal lobe, on your heart, that you might want to share with those who listen in today.
Yeah, what's hugely important, I think, for us now over the course of the last, really the last 9 months, especially, have brought into the spotlight conversations about race in general. We've seen a lot of kind of institutional moves. We're seeing a lot of statements. People are reading a lot of books and doing all of this stuff. I think it's important for us to understand, particularly as Christians, that the root of this work is actually Christ's command. We're called to not only love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now that's an easy thing. It's kind of an easy thing to say, but paired with that is an understanding that we have to love, that we're seeking to love our neighbors wisely and well. And in order to, and I've become deeply convinced that the only way for us to do that is for us to seek to understand one another. Yeah. And when it comes to issues of race, that requires an understanding of history. It requires an understanding of the ways in which kind of our society works. And the fact of the matter is that for many of us, that's an education that we were not given. And so insofar as it's one that we were not given, I think I think it's a responsibility of each of us to actually seek that out. Because that, and there's a humility required in that. There's also a willingness to be open to empathy when it comes to things like that, because the fact of the matter is that we live in a world where, because of the way that racialization functions, we have radically different experiences, even in the same spaces. And so the more we can be open to, the more that we can be open to walking alongside one another, doing the work of rejoicing when one another rejoice, of mourning when one another mourn, of actually bearing one another's burdens, all the one another's of Scripture.
Yep.
That's what can, I think those are some of the steps forward, especially as we work through what are profoundly polarizing times. We have to be willing to there are some things that we're going to have to be willing to take stands on. And one of the things that I think we fundamentally must take a stand on is, will we support the lives of our brothers and sisters? And that ought to be a non-negotiable. So it's not just, I said, this isn't just a local issue. It's a global one. And so as members of the body of Christ, as those who have been united to Christ by faith and by the Holy Spirit, it's important that his priorities are our priorities. And so when we see in Revelation the multicolored, multilingual multitude, that's the future that we're looking toward, and that's the future that we're fighting for.
So many thoughts come to mind. There's so much good work to do. Jesus prayed that we would be one, even as he and the Father are one. We recall St. Francis' remarkable prayer, not so much to be understood as to understand. And that requires learning, which requires listening. And we're grateful to have good guides. So Malcolm, thank you for your time. Thank you for all your work. May the Lord continue to sustain you and allow your lines to fall in pleasant places, especially as you press on towards the completion of your doctoral dissertation. And I'm so grateful for you taking the opportunity to join us today on Todd Talks.
Thank you, Dean Still, and I'm thankful for you.
All right. Have a good rest of the day. You all will talk again soon.